technique that everyone talks about for smooth and creamy blends. But if you tried it, you know the struggle. It can be slow and fiddly, and it feels like forever before you actually get somewhere with it. Here's the fun part though. Glazing has a secret side that makes blending easier and faster and way more enjoyable and satisfying. So in this video, I'm gonna share with you all the hidden secrets of glazing and how you can use what I'm gonna teach you today to blend faster than you ever thought possible. Before I tell you all that, we need to talk about what glazing is. Funnily enough, glazing was discovered by Dutch oil painters. They realized that they could apply thin layers of paint on a black and white sketch, therefore saving a lot of money in pigments, which is a mindset that I kinda like. Yeah, basically they were the OG's lab choppers. This technique is defined as the application of more than one transparent layers. In mini painting, we mostly use acrylics, but the gist is the same. Acrylic paints can be totally opaque or very transparent, just like with oils. Okay, but how much transparent? Well, this is the question now, isn't it? How much water should you add to glaze? And here's the big issue. You're used to think about glazing as a very transparent layer that you have to apply to your model 4, 5, even 6 or more times in order to have some effect on the surface. But when in truth, there's so much more to it. The thing is, opacity and transparency aren't binary. You need to see this more on a continuum with different levels throughout, where on the left side you have full opacity and on the right you have full transparency. There's so much focus on the right side of a continuum where you have very transparent paint completely overlooking the left side. No. You are missing out on some of the pro blending techniques. Pro painter examples of this are Richard Gray and Flamion. Flamion? How do you say that? We're gonna talk more about that later. First, let's take a closer look to the continuum. Continuum I created, make it as easy as possible for people to unlock the full power of glazing. So as you can see here in the chart, there are 4 different types of glaze consistencies. And one on the very far left, that's a base coat consistency. Because on the left, you have 100% opacity. And as you move towards the right side, the opacity percentage lowers gradually more and more, having more transparent paint. I also created a cheat sheet with visual cues for the different types of glaze consistencies that you can download for free now in the description down below. Please do your homework. Please note that the distinction between levels of opacity is kind of general. You won't need to replicate it with 100% accuracy. Now I'm gonna show you on a model some general signs that you can follow to recognize the consistency. The first glaze that I call strong glaze sits right after the base coat, and it has a very high percentage of opacity. It's basically Duncan's thin coats, except you use this for actually blending. From the cheat sheet, you can actually see a little bit of a primer showing through. That bit of transparency, it's what's gonna help us erasing the line between the 2 layers that you wanna blend together, just like this. In a couple of applications, you will erase the harsh edge between 2 layers. Remember that for every single painting technique, you don't just need the right consistency, but you also need to be able to move that pigment around with your brush in the right way. If you want to deep dive more on this type of glazing and how to control your brush with this type of consistency, check out my course in the link in the description so you can improve your skill, support the channel so I can buy food for my cat and have roof on my head. Moving on towards the right, we have the fat glaze. It still sits on the left side of the continuum, but a little bit more towards the center. This glaze has a double use. You can use it just like you use the strong glaze to smooth the transition between two layers, and it's gonna be more clean and more precise, but it's also gonna require you to apply more layers than the strong glaze, and also it will require you to have a higher brush control, because remember, the thinner the paint, the harder it is to move around, the more delicate the pressure it requires. The second use of the fat glaze is to build up layers of paint slowly. This is probably one of my favorite way to paint because you can actually show your brush strokes and create depth that regular flat layers blended wouldn't allow you to build otherwise. But how can you tell the difference? As a general rule, in a fat glaze, you can see a little bit of the palette showing through while mixing it, and when you apply it to the edge of two layers meeting, it's gonna show through a little bit. Don't get too caught up in this and thinking about, oh, it's a strong glaze or it's a fat glaze, because the distinction is purely theoretical to give you a general idea. Moving on to the right side even more, we have the thin glaze. This is what I'd consider to be the general stereotype of glazing. So a lot of water, a lot of layers, not my thing, but certainly it has its use. Mostly I use it with very pigment rich paints like Scale 75 Artist Range or Chimera, just to give saturation with what I call a wash glaze. And last but not least, on the far right corner, we have the Demon Child, the evil cleanup glaze. Here the dilution is high, but what also affects the very low opacity of this glaze is how much liquid you have on the brush, which in this case is very little. Very little. It should feel like you're painting and barely affecting the surface you're painting. This is very powerful if you want maximum smoothness, but also painful. It's a patient game. How many hours can you glaze in the same spot before you go insane? People are telling me I yell too much. I'm trying not to yell, but this makes me fucking cranky. As mentioned before, pros are using the left side of the continuum a lot because it's faster and it's more efficient. Flamion, for example, he does this. He applies flat layers of paint with full opacity and then he blends the transition between flat layers. This is very similar to what I do, the same actually, except I don't paint every layer then blend it. I add one layer at a time. So I add one layer, blend it, add another layer, then blend it, and by applying all the layers first, he creates something that's really satisfying to look at. This comes from the technique called cell shading that comes from comics, I think, and anime also. As much satisfying as this to look at, by painting flat planes, this style kind of misses out on something really important, the brush stroke. Because this style, it's not allowing you to show it, which is a pity because I think at a certain point, the brush stroke is really all that matters to make a piece personal and artistic. While on the other end, Richard Gray, it goes about a little bit differently, but I still would consider his approach more on the left side of the continuum than on the right. Or maybe just more in the middle. From the YouTube channel, you can't quite tell this, but in this display painting, it uses something similar to a fat glaze to layer the highlights with a very specific brush stroke. And I have to say, even though I never had a private session with them, a lot of my painting style comes from watching his Patreon. And overall, it feels like this style fits me more. Okay, but what's the whole point of this? Well, knowing about the continuum and knowing where you are in the continuum, it will allow you to use the whole continuum freely, just like pros do. Richard Gray, Flamion, and, well, me. This will allow you to skip all the struggle, the back and forth with wet blending, not knowing what to do, where to blend, and also unlock a wide variety of different painting approaches. Also, I'm starting to appreciate how important it is to have a different style, different finish, different way to approach painting, and how you can actually incorporate smoothness with texture and different brushstroke and yada yada yada. But how can you learn all this? Well, I was taught all these techniques from the masters themselves. And in this 35 minutes playlist, I'm gonna go over the best and optimal way to blend your miniatures to perfection. So click here and I will see you there. It's actually me in the past, but since